Hey everyone, Tankenstein here. In this video, I'll be reviewing the Mouse, a currently Tier 5, 7.7 BR heavy tank, but really super heavy tank, that exists as a special tech tree vehicle that is reintroduced to War Thunder every so often for events, typically in the Anniversary event. It plays in the German Ground Forces tech tree. In this video, I'll be going over everything that you need to know about this vehicle, including its stats, how it plays, its strengths and weaknesses. I'll give it some scores in several key areas, and then I'll give my final recommendation on if this vehicle is worth purchasing or not. As always, please consider subscribing for more content like this, as it'll give you super mouse powers like the ability to smell cheese from a million miles away. But without further ado, let's get into the video. Now, as always, I'll place the mouse's stats here on the side of the screen. Notable stats are its armor, speed, and reload rate. Now for how it plays. Essentially, this is a mobile bunker through and through. It is big, heavy, has a powerful cannon, and does not move quickly at all, though surprisingly is not the slowest vehicle in War Thunder. When using the mouse, you will be totally unable to purposefully capture control points, though through being a brutal frontline tank, you will still be able to somehow get a large amount of base caps with the mouse. It moves so slowly and is so poor in hilly terrain that flanking in this vehicle is a death sentence, meaning that the only way to really play this vehicle successfully is to move towards capture and control points and act as a frontline tank. In a down tier, this works incredibly well, especially if you use cover to protect your slightly more vulnerable sides and rear. In an up tier, you can still frontline with this vehicle, although it is strongly advised to stay just a touch behind the front lines, not drawing too much attention, as most higher BR, Heat FS, and APF SDS can still easily pen you, as well as ATGMs, helicopters, and of course airstrikes. Regardless, the 128mm KWK-44 cannon has enough power to shoot through almost every tank that it faces with ease, regardless of the shell that you have equipped, though of course the TS shell with the over 300mm of armor pen will be the best for destroying essentially every tank in game. The 75mm coaxial cannon is also powerful enough to destroy lightly armored vehicles and take out modules for more heavily armored vehicles, rendering them useless while you reload your main cannon. While the style of play for the mouse is largely dictated by its incredible heft, it fills its role better than nearly every other tank in War Thunder, at least relative to BR, and is just about the tankiest of the frontline tanks in game. Now that said, let's get into its strengths and weaknesses. And first, for its strengths, of course, number one, it has excellent armor around the entirety of it, and more importantly, the interior of the mouse is absolutely huge, which is what truly gives this vehicle its amazing survivability. Second, speaking of, the 6-man crew is amazing and is a key component for what makes the mouse usable and, in the eyes of some, into a great tank in War Thunder. For its third strength, it has a fantastic double cannon armament that acts like an upscaled version of what the M6A1 uses. The 128mm cannon stock ammunition is very powerful, and when using the higher penning TS ammunition, the mouse can destroy nearly all tanks from any angle that it might face. Further, the 75mm secondary cannon is excellent at harassing enemies, killing lightly armored vehicles, and destroying tracks, which is made easier by its incredibly fast reload rate. For its fourth strength, because of the electro-diesel powertrain, the mouse actually has a fantastic reverse speed of around 20 kilometers per hour. Beyond this, the mouse also has access to smoke grenades, and finally, the tracks are fairly difficult to destroy, owing to its very heavily armored side skirts. And now, of course, for the weaknesses. First and foremost, the mouse has incredibly poor speed. While technically not the slowest in the game, as some Churchill variants are indeed slower in terms of top speed, as well as of course the T95, the mouse will oftentimes reach the battle after battle lines have formed. On some large maps, you may not even reach the battle until it's more than halfway over, which will also contribute to survivability issues because of course by that time, enemies will have flanked and thus might be able to kill you when you're en route to the battle. Second, while the mouse has excellent armor, especially in a down tier, it is still incredibly susceptible to most ATGMs, Heat FS, APF SDS, and stronger APDS shells. Whether you have many tons of armor or not, it's all for naught if the enemy gets through, and get through they will, at least in an up tier. Third, the mouse is absolutely huge. huge, and as one of the largest vehicles in War Thunder, you cannot hide anywhere. For its fourth weakness, to this point, the mouse is so famous and heavy that many people love to focus it. As such, you will oftentimes have many people divert their attention from the battle at hand to simply use you as a bullet sponge. Additionally, planes love to drop bombs on the mouse, likely more so than any other tank in game. This is essentially one big target. For its fifth weakness, while the 128mm cannon is excellent, it has a slow reload speed and is also very large, meaning that it will be very easily destroyed by enemy fire. For its sixth strength, it has a mediocre turret traverse rate of between 5.6 and 8 degrees per second, though in actuality this is not incredibly bad considering the size and weight of the turret. And finally, it lacks a turret-mounted MG, making it so that helicopters and airplanes will be able to target you with near impunity. And now with all of that said, let's get into some scores for how I rate this vehicle. First and foremost, for armament, I give the mouse an 8 out of 10. With the exception perhaps the Object 279, the mouse essentially represents the pinnacle of APC-BC ammunition in War Thunder. That is to say, pretty much old-style ammunition. It has over 300mm of armor pen at max and over 100 grams of explosive filler from its 128mm KWK-44 cannon, and that's from its TS shell. If using a mid-level Panzergranaten 43 shell, you still get over 270mm of armor pen at max, but you get nearly 800 grams of explosive filler, meaning that the easier to research shell might be the preferred shell for many people. Regardless, the 128mm cannon is strong enough to be able to knock out most enemies with a single hit, barring an odd ricochet. And while its reload is poor at between 18.2 and 23.66 seconds, depending of course on crew skill, it is not the absolute worst, especially when considering the incredible armor and survivability of this vehicle, allowing you to survive numerous shots if you get hit whilst reloading. Further, the 75mm cannon with its researchable 38C heat shell provides up to 100mm of armor pen, which is surprisingly effective at either destroying lightly armored vehicles or disabling heavier vehicles, occasionally resulting in a random kill or a barrel destruction. This 75mm cannon has a far better reload rate at around 4 to 5 seconds, which makes it incredibly effective at temporarily hampering enemy vehicles enough so that they cannot hurt you or just outright destroying them. Regardless, the armament on the mouse is just about as impressive as its incredibly heavy armor. Now second, for mobility, I give the mouse a 2 out of 10, which might be surprising to some people. That's not 1 out of 10, but I have my reasons. While not as outright slow as the T95 or, again surprisingly, the Churchill Mark 7 or Black Prince, the mouse is still incredibly slow, with its top speed clocking in at a mere 20.7 kilometers per hour. Further, it has a poor 6.4 horsepower per ton power to weight ratio when fully upgraded, which means that it is slow to accelerate, incredibly slow actually. Interestingly though, it can still hit its top speed quicker than one might think, considering the impressive bulk of this vehicle, coming in at again 188 tons. Further, it has a surprisingly good reverse speed that many vehicles would actually be jealous of at 20.7 kilometers per hour, thanks to Dr. Porsche's electric transmission. Regardless, the true slowness of this vehicle is both in comparison to those that it faces, with many opponents having upwards of 4 times the power to weight ratio of the mouse, but also in the fact that the mouse essentially stops whenever it needs to turn. This, along with its incredibly slow hill climbing characteristics, is what makes the mouse slow. In a straight line, it still feels very slow, but it is at its absolute worst when trying to turn or navigate hilly terrain. And now for survivability, I give the mouse an 8 out of 10. While many people might argue, and rightfully so, that the mouse is extremely killable, especially in today's War Thunder, as its armor is largely meaningless versus modern projectiles, and its slow speed makes it into a sitting duck, the mouse still remains as one of the most survivable tanks in War Thunder. This is for several reasons. First, though its armor is only steel, and thus can be penned by many Heat FS, APF SDS, ATGMs, and APDS shells, it is still incredibly thick, measuring at over 200mm in most areas around the tank, and that's without considering the armor slope present in many areas. With that considered, and when considering many typical combat ranges and attack angles, you will find that many shells will simply ricochet off the mouse, or explode without ever penning it. Even if they do make it through, the ones that typically do don't have the best post-pen damage, which leads me to the second reason why the mouse is so survivable. Quite simply, it's huge. Because of the size of the mouse, the crew is spaced out extremely well, with many things like the cannon breaches, firewalls, and more acting as partitions that separate portions of the crew, mitigating damage if a shell successfully pens. Further, because the mouse is 7.7 BR, many of the shells that can actually pen it, namely HeatFS and APF SDS, are relatively crude, and typically don't have nearly as good of post-pen damage as you might expect with higher BR variants of these ammo types. Further, barring a direct hit or a near hit from a 1,000 plus pound bomb, the mouse is also incredibly resistant to airstrikes, though helicopters will go after you and will still be able to kill you, even if it might take them a while. Now overall, I give the mouse a 6 out of 10. The mouse, more than nearly any other vehicle in War Thunder, is a vehicle whose success is almost entirely determined by chance. If you get into an up tier versus more effective cannons with better ammunition, or versus better close air support, or if you simply get placed into a battle that has already been going on for several minutes, your chances of success will drop substantially, as your armor will be essentially meaningless, and your speed will mean that people will already be at the flanks waiting to easily kill you. If you are, however, in a less open map, such as a city, and you have the benefit of a down tier and don't have to drive far to meet the enemy, then you can very easily be the top tank in a match. Because this vehicle is the most extreme World War II tank in War Thunder, it by its own nature faces Cold War and even some post-Cold War vehicles. But if in its element versus vehicles from or near its own era, the mouse can and will be incredibly powerful and fun. So, should you research this tank? Yes. 100%. Though the mouse is a bit of an anachronism in War Thunder, harkening back to times where there weren't so many shell types to contend with, armor types, and such rampant CAS, it is also a fun tank that can survive 188 metric tons of damage. It is always fun to show up into a match and meet other random mouse players, and create a 400 plus ton wall of steel. Additionally, the mouse is still incredibly usable, albeit in an increasingly situational way, which means that it is still a viable part of a lineup. And, most importantly, this is now a collector's vehicle, and if Gaijin doesn't bring it back permanently, which I don't suspect they ever will, it is just a vehicle that, at this point, most people can earn during random events, typically at or around their November anniversary. So yes, this is a 100% must-have vehicle if you have the ability to earn it, not only for its power and fun, but also because of its collectability and because it is a remnant of War Thunder's simpler past. But that said, thank you all so much for watching. Please let me know what you thought about this video and what you think of the mouse in the comments below. Also, if you like this video, please consider subscribing to my channel and liking this video, as those both help me out tremendously in my continuing quest to become a big enough YouTuber to finally convince Gaijin to let me rent out the E100. Believe it or not, they actually will not let me touch the E100 because of how rare it is, but I guess some other YouTubers they let actually rent that thing out. Either way though, thanks so much, and I will see you all on the other side. Take care, everyone.